Hello, my beautiful book besties. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. Today we're going to be doing none other than the beloved mid-year book freakout tag. Absolutely adore this tag. This is one of the very few tags that I love doing every year that I actually watch other people do as well. It's not only a great time to check in on your Goodreads number goal, because that doesn't really matter to me. I just love looking back at the books that I've read so far and kind of assessing how my year is going. Am I doing well? Am I getting some really good quality books? Do I maybe need to slow down and just refocus on like my priority TBRs, or just what I need to do to make the second half of the year even better? But in case anyone is interested, I set my goal this year to read 75 books. Typically I set my goal at 100, but I really just wanted to dial down the speed I was reading and really find some good quality books and even read some great backlists that I haven't read yet. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that so far. I will say I'm killing it with my number goal though, because I've read 52 out of the 75. I think I'm like 16 or 15 books ahead at this point, so I'm feeling pretty confident I'm going to hit the 75. But looking back on what I've read so far this year, I feel amazing. I have found some new favorite authors. I've read some favorite author backlist. This year I've kind of labeled this year as the cozy comfort reads because I've been doing some rereads, which I never thought I would say. But that definitely does not mean that I haven't had some pretty massive disappointments along the way, especially with those new releases that have come out this year. So without further rambling, you guys know the drill. I'm sure you've seen this video before, but I'm excited to chat with you about some of my favorite books I've read so far this year. So let's just go ahead and dive right in with the first question. So in typical Olivia fashion, I'm such an indecisive person that I do have multiple answers for some of these questions. I did try to make sure there wasn't a whole lot of overlap because I feel like it does get a little bit repetitive repeating the same book. So the first question is, what are your favorite books that you've read so far in 2024? And I do have a couple different like categories for this. The first one being a reread because it just tops my favorites of all time. We have none other than The Hunger Games. This is a reread for me. I was reading it or rereading it along with my patrons this year, and this was hands down the best decision I've ever made considering we just got the news about a brand new book coming next year. This is obviously one of my favorite books of all time. I probably don't talk about it enough here on my channel, but The Hunger Games is my actual Roman Empire. I think about Pete and Katniss at least once a day, so this obviously had to go on this list. Next, I have what feels like another reread, but it's mainly because I grew up with this franchise and it is such a comfort for me. We have The Hobbit. I had never actually read this before, but like I said, I watched and have rewatched the movies so many times. Like, those are my most rewatched movies, is The Lord of the Rings. And because I've been rewatching the movies this year, of course I had to tell myself it was finally time to stop being a fake fan and actually read The Hobbit this year, and let me tell you, it did not disappoint. Andy Serkis, who plays Gollum, his narration of the audio is out of this world insane. He can sound like Gandalf from the movies, he can sound like Gollum, he can sound like Bilbo, but it just threw me into the experience and I blazed through 2/3 of the book in a day. If you're ever gonna pick this up, definitely recommend picking up the audio with it because oof, it was just mind-blowing how good it was. So I just had to put this one on the list because it just means so much to me personally. I grew up with it and this was the year I finally read it, so I was super happy about that. Getting to some newer releases though, you guys know that a fantasy book is gonna make it on my top favorites of the year without question. I will have one probably every single year. That is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicarelli. This book honestly just shook my world and surprised me and gave me more faith in young adult fantasy again. I feel like we just get so many of the same tropes, so much of the same romance where I feel like I'm reading the same book over and over again when it comes to YA, but this book just completely blew everything I knew about fantasy out of the water. The plot twists and the way I was sucked in from page one and could not put this down. I mean, I haven't had that happen to me in such a long time. time. The second book comes out in February, I believe, and that just feels like years away. I don't know how I'm gonna wait. This first book left off on such a crazy cliffhanger. The characters, the way they loved each other, but also hated each other, like this is true enemies to lovers, just astounded me. The world that she created in such a short book, and for this to feel so mature for young adult, was just incredible. Everything about this was incredible. The writing was poetic, the characters were amazing, the pace, the plot twists, the romance. I literally have nothing poor to say about this. I've even gone and bought more of the author's backlisted titles because I cannot wait until the second book. And of course, I feel like this book is going to end up on everyone's favorite list. Like when we see favorite books or favorite book videos coming out at the end of the year, this is guaranteed to be like number 2 at least. That is Just for the Summer by Miss Abby Jimenez. I got to meet Abby and I think I blacked out. Like, I am such a huge fan of her. She did something in this book that no other romance book has done. The maturity and the character development and the growth we got in this book was like none other that I've read before. Her books just hit so hard and so deep. I'm not going to talk about this book anymore because I feel like everyone has talked about this and you guys are probably sick of seeing it at this point, but there's honestly such a good reason for it. Abby just puts her heart, soul, blood, sweat, and literal tears into what she writes. She is changing the world with her books and just bending the genre to herself to where I feel like she is her own genre now. Like she is the queen of romance and no one can tell me otherwise. I could sit here and reread it today and you guys know I'm not a rereader, so I feel like that says a lot in and of itself. The next question is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far this year? And this is going to come as no surprise to anyone. It is a fantasy. It is a popular author. Have you guessed yet? Yes, it is House of Flame and Shadow. Listen, I know people had their issues with this one. I know it read more of like an action, crazy, like Marvel type of situation. When I tell you I ate this up, I could not stop thinking about it until I knew what happened to these characters because I was so scared and so terrified of what was gonna happen. And if an author can put you on the edge of your seat like that, I mean, hands down, it has to be a 5-star read. I know people are tired of seeing Sarah J. Maas and tired of hearing about her, but I don't care. I personally love it and this book did not disappoint for me. But I also had to quickly mention Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I currently am loaning out both my copies that I own to family and friends right now, so that's exciting. But I loved this. I know some people had issues with it and I do agree it was more heavy on the war and it wasn't as good as the first one, at least for me. Even though it had a whole different vibe, I really truly believe that she did everyone and everything justice in this book. I don't know how she could have handled it better or any other way. I just fell in love with Roman and Iris even more, and I'm determined to read all of Rebecca Ross's books by the end of the year because I just love her that much. The next question is, what is a new release that you haven't read yet but you really need to get to or want to read? And for me, that is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This did just come out this past week or a couple days ago, and I am currently reading it. I'm about a third of the way through and honestly I absolutely love it. I'm trying to block out everyone else's opinions. I do want to make sure that I finish this book. It's an obvious thing that I'm going to finish this book, but I really couldn't think of any other like releases that are coming out the rest of the year that I care about more than this one. So this kind of had to take priority for me for this question. But we also have the next question, which is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And it was kind of hard to narrow down. I mean, I do have a top book, which is a novel love story by Ashley Poston. This is coming out in just a few days and I am itching to get my hands on it. For one, her covers are the best, but I love the emotion and the thought and the magical elements that she weaves in her books. And I know this one is not going to disappoint. I also have The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. The Wishing Game was on my top 3 books, or top 5 at least, of last year, and again, I just just cannot believe we're getting another book from her so soon. This one is supposed to be kind of like a Narnia retelling or Narnia inspired about these boys that go through a wardrobe into a different world. So I guess we'll see how close it comes to Narnia, but regardless, her writing is just so heartfelt and emotional and important. Like, the message of her book was just really important, especially for someone that has sisters that have been through the foster care system. That was a huge theme in The Wishing Game, and that just really came close to home for me. But we also have The Huntress by Emily Lloyd Jones. This author, I've told you guys a million times, is completely underrated. The Bone Houses will forever stand as a 5-star for me. It was creepy, it was adventurous, the romance was amazing, I cried. I still have The Drowned Woods to read by her, but this one sounds phenomenal. Most of her books are mythology or like Welsh inspired, so I'm really excited to see what this story is gonna hold. And then we also have The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig, who I love so much. No, I haven't read House of Roots and Ruin yet, and I feel really guilty about that, but I do know this new book is not going to be tied to that duology, I believe, but the cover alone is giving like a dark academia gothic, and I think she's going a little bit more of the horror route, which I find very intriguing. So I'm very interested to see what she's going to do with this one. The next question is, what has been your biggest disappointment? And unfortunately, it's 2 new releases that came out this year that I gave 2, 2.5, 3 stars, and I honestly thought I was going to give both of them at least 4 stars. And that is Funny Story by Emily Henry and One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I know I'm probably in the minority opinion for both of these, but that's okay. This one just did not have that witty banter main male character that I just love. There was just something missing for me about this one. I think because she's going more of like the contemporary chick lit route versus just your typical like fun, cute rom-com. And while I don't find that to be an issue, I think it's just hard for me to step back from her first 3 rom-coms because this one just feels so different. Honestly, so did Happy Place, and I'm still gonna read her books, but I just really thought I was gonna love this one more. And then Ruth Ware, I had really high hopes for because it's a tropical setting where you have a reality TV show. I haven't read a Ruth Ware in at least 3 or 4 years, and I was like, okay, this is one I'm actually intrigued by. The It Girl I did not read. I did not read 0 Days. I just don't have an interest in either one of those, but this one sounded really fun. It's for my Patreon book club, so I'm not gonna say any more, but let's just say I was sorely very disappointed with this one, and I wanted to love it so much more, but unfortunately I am gonna give it a fairly low rating. So not gonna tell you what, because we haven't discussed this for my book club, but I'm very disappointed in both of these. On the other hand, we have What is Your Biggest Surprise, or which book caught you off guard that you didn't think you were gonna love, and I ended up loving. We have the reappearance of Rachel Price. This book I picked up on a complete whim, wasn't even planning to buy it. I started to listen to it on audio and was like, whoa, I need the physical copy of this book. Holly Jackson is again an author where I read one of her books, didn't really care for it, decided to like not read anything from her for a couple years, just like Ruth Ware. But in this case, I love this book. I gave it a 4.5 or even a 5-star. It wasn't perfect, but for the length that it was, it kept me so entertained throughout the entire book, and I just thought it was a really fun time. The audio narration was great, the premise was great, I loved the family drama. I love that they were also filming a documentary. I love when there's like mixed media or other things going on besides just the actual plot. So this was just the perfect formula for me to love this book, and I am so glad because I think I might go back and read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder before the TV show drops. The next question is your new favorite author. It can be new to me or it can just be like a debut author. And for me, it is Frida McFadden. I really did not think I was going to put Frida McFadden on this list, but here we are. I went into this year really wanting to find a new favorite mystery thriller author, like of all time. Someone whose books that I just binge read, can't get enough of, buy their new release, and it turned out to be Frida McFadden of all people. Is her writing the most complex? No. Are her plots completely like groundbreaking? Not necessarily, but the twists that she has delivered for all of her books that I've read so far have not been disappointing at all. And yeah, I think I'm actually a huge fan of Frida McFadden now. If you have not read a Frida McFadden yet, I definitely can recommend her. The next question is, who is my newest fictional crush? And I honestly thought about talking about Peter Millark for 10 minutes in this video, but technically he's not new, so I had to go with the second best choice, and that is Adrian from Life's Too Short. This was the last Abby Jimenez book that I had to read before I finally read all of her backlist, and this one also did not disappoint. Adrian, the main male interest in this book, is so sweet. The way he cares for Vanessa and her baby niece is the cutest thing I think I've ever read about. It was honestly just giving me baby fever the whole time I was reading this, and how he was just so willing to help and do anything for them I think was just so attractive. But if you're hesitant at all about reading Abby's backlist books, don't be, because I promise they are just as good as her newer books. Listen, I know I'm talking about Abby Jimenez a lot, but our next question is, what book made you cry? And just for the summer, it made me sob. It was incredible in the best way possible. I was crying because I knew that the situation was so realistic, but I was so sad, but also like so happy by the end. And there was just like so much happening, so many emotions running high. Like, how can you not cry while reading this book? This is basically like a video dedicated to Abby at this point. On the other hand, we have What Book Made You Happy? And I'm so excited to talk about Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This book is like my newest cozy fantasy comfort read. I still need to read the others in the series as well as The Witch Would Not, but this author is so whimsical and it feels like coming home. Her writing truly feels like coming home or getting the excitement of reading a fairy tale like you were as a child. I thought it was incredible, and it just made me so giddy and happy. And even though there was some sad things and serious things happening in this book, the end was just so sweet and heartfelt, and this is now a new favorite of all time for me. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year? And yes, I'm going to talk about 3 different books because I've kind of turned into a collector's edition girly. And what started it all is I ended up getting the Illumicrate edition of Study and Drowning on Pango books. This was one of my top 3 favorites that I read so far last year, and I cannot wait to reread it. But this is just actually stunning, you guys. I'm so sad that I missed out on being part of Illumicrate at the time, but I'm so glad that there is people on Pango that resell these. And how can you resist? Like, the dark academia colors and theme of this book is just absolute perfection, so I'm so happy I got my hands on it. I also have one of my first Illumicrate books, Fathom Folk, which I've talked about in multiple videos at this point, but it is the perfect summary book. Like, can we talk about these sprayed edges? It's just incredible. And then you also have the beautiful, beautiful end pages, and then you also get to the hardcover, which is like this beautiful sea dragon. This book is just absolutely stunning. And then I have none other than the UK editions of Belladonna and Foxglove. I don't know if you guys have seen these, but ever since I saw this first one, I was like, I haven't even read any of the books and I need these. So I actually am going to sell my US edition because these are just so much prettier. The color scheme and kind of like this spooky art style is just absolutely amazing. This one doesn't have anything on the naked cover, but Belladonna actually has this beautiful pink kind of foliage on the front and the pink on the spine. These are just so beautiful, and I love having them displayed on my bookshelf now. The next question is, what has your favorite book to movie adaptation been so far this year? And I will say I don't think there's been anything. Maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but I do have 2 rewatches. One that I mentioned earlier, Lord of the Rings, one of the best book to adaptation movies of all time. And also I've rewatched The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I have rewatched this movie like 4 times already since it came out. Obviously, you guys know I'm a huge Hunger Games fan, and maybe I'm forgetting something, but I feel like these these two have been not necessarily new, but they've been my favorites that I've seen this year. And last but not least, what are the books that I need to read by the end of the year? Two of these are pretty backlisted, and I'm going to be so annoyed and frustrated at myself if I don't finally read them this year. The first being Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I cannot believe I've only read this one in Crown of Midnight, but this series I'm planning to completely finish off, especially in November, December. I think that's the perfect time to get back into this series. Who knows, maybe I will be in the mood at some point during the summer, but this series I absolutely must finish before the day I die. I also have Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is a huge backlisted book where I'm constantly still seeing on Bookstagram to this day. People keep telling me, especially some of you guys, that oh my gosh, you love circus, it's fantasy, this is going to be the series for you. I know Legendary, the second book, is even better, and if I could just finally carve out the time to read Caraval, I know I would absolutely love it. And last but not least, we have a book talk or indie published sensation that people will not stop talking about. That is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. My interest is really just piqued with this one. I kind of am praying and hoping that I'm not completely disappointed with this. I've had some very big disappointments this year with Powerless, Dawn of Onyx. Those were first indie published and I gave it like 2 and 3 stars. I just was not a big fan. I know this one has also been indie published, but it's gonna be put in bookstores soon, and I'm definitely not trying to bash indie books, but for whatever reason, the romantasy, like TikTok girlies, have not been right for me, and I'm hoping that they're right with this one. Alright friends, that is the end of my 2024 mid-year book freakout tag. You will have to let me know if you've had any of the same favorites, maybe you've had some of the same disappointments, but also leave me a book that you've read and loved this year that you really think I should put on my top priority list to finish before the end of the year is over. I always love hearing your guys' recommendations for me because you're usually right. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, hanging out with me. I love you guys so incredibly much, and I will see you in my next video.